afternoon. My name is Jeremiah Ojo. I am a art business consultant and founder of Creative Milieu Consulting Group. Welcome to our panel, Echoes of Black Art Ecologies. I'll be moderating this conversation with these lovely ladies. The conversation is centered around ecosystems that facilitate professional development, curation, and studio practice for Black artists around the world. So I'll let each of them introduce themselves.
Awesome. I guess I can get started, but I feel like, Mikhaile should totally kick us off. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Tiffany Latrice, and I'm the founder and executive director of TILA Studios. So I really consider myself a social engineer. I've always been that way since I was like 13 years old when I first pitched an art studio and won $500 as a part of a Girls Inc. entrepreneurship program. And I think I first started my entrepreneurship career actually painting nails on a playground. And so I've always been about building and fostering community and really being innovative with my hands. So I run an art studio for Black women artists in Atlanta. And we're here exhibiting at Prizm and representing amazing artists that are a part of our Garden Fellowship program. So I'll talk more about that. But we do a myriad of things, and I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mikhaile Solomon. I am the founder and director of Prizm. I have been running this organization now for 7 years. My background is in architecture. I love building things. I love building spaces. I love seeing how people actually commune in spaces. So Prizm is obviously a natural fit for where my mind is. I've essentially done every single artistic practice you could possibly think of. I was a dancer. I was a pianist. I have my undergraduate degree in theater. I'm also an architect. So I've just always been a creative person, and I love collaborating with creative people.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Cunningham. I'm the co-founder and creative director of Milieu. And Milieu is an organization that works to create greater visibility of arts professionals in the museum field very specifically. And so I work as a sort of infiltrator. I'm working to create or to reduce barriers that are within the museum field specific. So there are many of art worlds or many parts of the art world, and so museums are very specific. And so I have about 100 museums throughout the country partnered with my organization, specifically working on racial equity, but again, more so on creating spaces for people of color, people of African descent, as well as creating more access for people who don't know about these opportunities at all. And so I really consider myself as an agent for arts and culture in the museum field. I've been in the museum field my entire career, studying art history, studying cultural heritage preservation, with a real dream to become a curator, but noticing the faultiness and the inequity in the field, deciding to create my own lane, and creating Milieu was, I would say, one of the best things that I've done. I've been able to get hundreds of people of color job opportunities within the field at this point, and so it's been a real blessing to even have support from Mikhaile from the founding of Milieu, which has only been 4 years now, and to continue to grow and gain visibility is really important to me, because the more visible my work is the more opportunities that I'm able to create and to carve out for people of color.
Thank you, ladies. It's quite interesting as you guys are explaining your background and the context to which you are in the art space. I think personally of how I know each of you. And for me specifically, that works in professional development exclusively and specifically for artists and creatives of African descent and galleries and cultural institutions. in my own journey of traversing and understanding the art ecology as a broad capital E, I'm also learning that each one of them kind of represents a certain step within my own development, my own professional development. I met Stephanie, Milieu, actually at the Studio Museum when they had, what was it, the first year?
Yeah, it was our first year anniversary in Studio Museum,
Right.
at Studio Museum in Harlem, right?
Exactly. Mikhaile, many of the artists I do studio management for and with had shown at Prizm and have found a lot of support from platform to curation and context. And we were connected, and fortunately I was able to join the board 2 years ago and have been integral in just the support of and the growth of the organization. So it's been great. And then also Tiffany, TILA Studios. I'm an Atlantan. How many Atlantans in the house? ATL? Well represented. Yeah, right when you were kicking off, we did a workshop together, had a lot of great conversations and connected, and had a passion for supporting and cultivating opportunities for not just any artist, but Black female artists. And it's really great to be amongst friends, but also really amazing professionals and dynamic women. So I want to talk a little bit deeper about even just the title that I came up with for this, Echoes of Black Art Ecologies, because I do see it as an echo, right? That as I'm learning, I shout something into the stratosphere, and each one of these ladies, their organizations, the artists, the ideas that they have bounce back, and it becomes a dialogue, right? Not just a verbal dialogue, but a visual dialogue, which is really beautiful. So I want to pose a question to you all. In developing your organizations and working for, with, around, and about ideas and artists, what has been the most fulfilling aspect of that work? I know that's a deep question.
Ooh, that's a good question.
I think for me is helping people get paid, help people get their work out, get their word out, helping people gaining more professional development in how to do their work effectively and how to really make bank is really important to me. And I think as much as the work, you know, the events, the articles that I write, you know, the panels that I get to be on is really critical because it allows more Black and brown people to get more money, right? And so that is so important to me, right? The socioeconomics of it all is the most important part to me. I think increasing the visibility is great. I think getting the word out is great, but the money, right, needs to be right for us. And so as this work continues for me, I make that very clear. You know, it's just like, you know, you want to see us, you want, you know, our work, you want us to perform, right? There needs to be a real dollar amount to that, attached to that in a real way that can change the trajectory of people's experiences in life.
Sure. Thank you. Clap for that.
Hey,
money.
Amen. I mean, I have to echo Stephanie's point about socioeconomics because, I mean, you know, Prizm is an art fair. It's a commercial space, but it's, hello? Yes, is that better? Yes. It is a commercial space that, of course, simultaneously promotes the pedagogical understanding of the work that is exhibited, but it's also about generating dollars to support the continued growth economically, as well as an insertion in the larger artistic canon. These are talented people who have, quite frankly, and very strangely in many ways, not been a large part of the consistent and growing conversation around the arts. And so, you know, our interest is in making sure that these talented people are consistently and always a part of the conversation, and they also make bank, as Stephanie mentions.
Yeah, and I really think our work is in conversation with each other, right? So our work is rooted in our Above 4 campaign. Only 4% of art across museums and galleries are from Black women artists. And so TILA is a visual arts incubator. So I think about tech incubation and I say, all right, if tech incubation is happening, there can be a visual arts incubation because artists are creative entrepreneurs, right? So it's that economic value. So I think of my work as incubating these artists to take their careers to the next level. I'm not necessarily looking to, my ROI is creating a thriving ecosystem, right? And so when I do that, then our work is elevated and it's going to the next level. And so I think of myself creating that pipeline and that direct disruption in an industry that is so white. And so when we show up in numbers, when my garden fellows are here, when we bring them down, when you see how beautiful and how excellent they are in their presentation and their skill and their tact across mediums, how powerful is that? And you're like, man, a Black woman did that? I'm like, oh, hell yeah, we did. Like, it's amazing. And for her to, she's pushing and propelling museum professionals, and I'm providing her artists now. And now Mikhaile's giving us a platform to showcase and sell our work. And now we're going back to Atlanta with some money in our pockets to make a new body of work to come back next year and sell out at VIP opening. And like, to me, when I look at that, I'm like, wow, we are here and we're showing up, right? And we are young. You know, I'm 31, and I really look at this work as my life's work. Like, I am doing this for my great-grandmother. I am doing this for every woman that came before me. And so my hands, like, when I get tired, I'm not really tired, you know, because, like, it's a marathon. I'm not sprinting to the end. I'm here for the long haul, and I'm like, it's just beautiful to hear that. Like, I'm like almost in tears because just all of us are so in conversation with each other, and I'm so excited for the future.
And I think a part of that too is that we also like see each other, we know each other, and we see the value, like the intrinsic value in the hard work each of us are doing to propel ourselves collectively forward. Yeah. And I think that's the topic of the fair this year is Love in the Time of Hysteria, and I think this and the way we work together is such a prime example of that. Yeah. Like, we know each other, and we lovingly find how we can connect each other and propel each other forward.
Yeah. And more specifically, going back to the tying thread, the echo that I'm hearing, economics, right? Economics is about ownership of ideas, and not the, I guess, commodification of it at the highest extent, because it's different. With all of us, we're negotiating these cultural assets as ownership, as legacy, right? Knowing that we are African ancestral people, there's a deeper meaning to the colors, the forms, the lines, the shapes. There's a rhythm that makes your shoulders rock when you see something, right? And it's really beautiful when you're able to be in conversation with people and hold and share space and create space that creates ownership. Because part of it is this idea or this illusion of arrival, where we feel that we reach a certain level of success that we've made it, or it's some level of atonement, but it is about ownership. And the economics of it, or creating spaces and educating and allowing other people to know that there are other spaces and places, that if an artist needs studio management, if an artist needs a place to create work, if an artist needs a platform to sell, if an artist even wants to work in a museum or understand how to navigate the museum system, or Black museums or museums in Black communities, what are those, right? Having a multiplicity of Blackness and options to explore is important. So as we continue to kind of push this conversation on the contributions, let's talk a little bit more about the artist, right? In all the other panels, they talked about different aspects, and I want to spend specific time talking about artists because they make all of this possible. Talk to me a little bit about some of the highlights of artists or art institutions and opportunities that you were able to connect with during your journey, and how you even see that in your neighbor.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I think what's the hardest part about my job is that I am an artist as well. I'm a painter, you know, and I communicate with my paintbrush, and I understand, and I'm sensitive, you know, so I have to be straight-faced sometimes and a businesswoman, but like at the core of me, I am one emotional being. And I think that is the hardest part of doing the work and working with artists. But the greatest, I think I use that as my asset because I can empathize with them. I know where they're coming from. And so when we're talking through things, you know, I think of Black women, the women that I support. When you think of Black women artists, you know, to be Black and to be a woman is one of the hardest things, right? And then for people to think of your work as valuable, right? And you're creating from a sense of emotion and a place of maybe even pain, and to show yourself up in that, and then try to have people validate you if you want to, like, if you think that, you know, when you're in a exhibiting in a space and you're seeking validation, and sometimes people don't give that to you, you know, what that does to the psychology of it, right? And so when I look at the work that I do, it's more about support, because my background also is in history. I got my women's history background at Sarah Lawrence College, and I wrote about 18th century Black women artists who were creating and making space for themselves in their private homes to take their career to the next level. And when I read about Meta Warrick, and when I read about all these women, I was like, okay, now we need to own public spaces. But public spaces, you know, is exposure too. So sometimes you get hit a lot. And so when you get beat up, who's picking you up? Right, so TILA is about picking each other up, and then I think Mikhaile and you all, you validate us and you give us space to showcase. So I come at this work from a very empathetic view and understanding, because I am each one of the Garden Fellows, right? I'm not exhibiting. One day I'll be at Prizm, maybe 10 years when I'm like 40, but not right now, you know. And I think it's just really cool to see women in my age range doing exceptional things and knowing that, like, I'm there to catch them if they fall.
I mean, I think for me, my relationship with artists has been mostly through the conversations prior to having established Prizm, was essentially complaints. You know, like I don't feel seen in this space, in this marketplace, and I was just kind of thinking through all these conversations with several artists, mostly here in Miami, you know, that, you know, this huge behemoth comes to Miami every year, and there's no real entry point because they're not necessarily represented by art galleries. So how do they participate? How do they have an opportunity to be a part of a platform that will bring people to support and value their work economically? And I said, well, I got certain skills. I might as well, I could put my skills to practice and create something that would do exactly what it is they wanted to do. So that's largely been my relationship with artists. And I do have somewhat of a artistic inclination, so I can also sympathize with artists, understanding, you know, their wants and their needs. And I try my best every day to facilitate that.
I think for me, with my support for visual artists has largely been through the medium of not just cultural institutions, but academic institutions. So I get plugged in largely when institutions are interested in Black and brown artists. They'll hit me up and they'll want to maybe showcase an artist at a museum or / have lectures that are more inclusive of Black and brown voices. And I think that academia is a large part of the art world that also isn't talked about as much as it should, because before people become museum professionals, arts professionals, professors, they go through this problematic narrative and they learn of the hierarchies of the art world, right? They learn through this art historical canon that is very problematic. And so some institutions are working to shift that. And so I have the opportunity of sharing artists information with them. I have the opportunity of giving artists a platform to lecture within the universities about their work, and also having the opportunity to talk about the problematic narratives of their work within the institutions. Because I think sometimes what people think is that once I get into a large institution like the Met, it's great, right? And it is great. It gives you much more exposure. But I'll give you for an example. When they had the Kerry James Marshall work up about a year or two ago, it was complaints from Black and brown folks about the narrative, how the narrative of his work was presented, right? And so it's important that I have the access as like working as an intermediary to say to the Met, like, look, you know, this is a narrative that needs to shift, or this is a narrative that should be used. You know what I'm saying? So really working within the medium of a support system for Black and brown artists to create and to get opportunities within academia and cultural spaces. Definitely,
and something that I think is resounding that comes with art, because art is spiritual, it's visceral. It requires support. Support is advocacy. Success is predicated on support. So for all the work that we do collectively and individually rather, is about support. And it's not easy. Myself, former practicing artist, no, you don't ever really stop being a practicing artist. What am I saying? Photographer, you know? And it was through that orientation of ideating and saying that I wanted to see an image in the world that represented who I was, a liminal space, not here or there, but in between, not quite Nigerian, not quite African American. What does that look like? So art was an outlet for me to do that. But then also in my failed experience as a professional artist, as a photographer who couldn't eat, right? That same idea of a starving artist, that was me 6 years ago. And it was through that process I was able to realize that, wait, Jeremiah, you have transferable skills, right? Because I come from banking. I used to work in banking, but I wasn't applying it because I was just using one side of my brain. And then when I realized that I could support other artists by, one, understanding their process in the studio, right? Materials, ideation, frustration, the creative block, but then also go back to my business banking experience and say that I can balance the tides here, that I can talk about materials, conceptualization, weight-load ratio, color, tone, form, but then also talk about inventory management, price strategy, fair strategy, all the necessary things to navigate an ecosystem. I, like yourself, like all of you, oscillating between different disciplines, were able to lend more knowledge to the traditional idea of what artists thought as support. So institution building is not easy. I know all of us have 1,001 stories about how tough it is.
I think too, beyond support, like I think what it comes down to is talking about how we are funding Prizm, how we are funding TILA, how we are funding Museum Hue, right? We're so used to operating in scarcity and having this scarcity mindset that sometimes we don't shift to the abundance mindset, right? Because we're just trying to make it to make it. And I think we need to really be honest about how we're actually funding the arts and championing these new innovative institutions, because it's just like, I know Mikhaile's hustling, I know I'm hustling, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. There's so much wealth in this room of artwork being bought. And yes, buy the art. I want you to buy our whole entire booth, but then also ask us how we're being funded. How can I help you continue to keep going and growing? And those are the conversations that I really want to have, because I think we're not honest about how things happen and how much grit it takes to produce something like this. We're always quick to maybe judge or critique and say it could be better, but the amount of work it takes just to make this thing happen is impeccable. It's a lot of work. And so I think we got to have the money talk. That's real. It's cute, but we need the money talk.
To add to that, you know who do ask that all the time? White people. White people see me work and they see how far my work goes, and they're like, how do you do this? How are you funded?
Definitely.
All the time. Black and brown people, nope. Nope. It is ingrained in white people to think about money. To think about money and to think about how you're able to move, because people are like, you're doing so much. Oh my God, you have to have so much money to do this. Or if I'm not beyond just their curiosity, they're like, oh, do you know about this, this, this? So they're also providing information about different funding opportunities, different platforms that provides funds and or access to different funds as well. And so I think for me, and that's why I thought it was important to also start the conversation about socioeconomics, because it is different for us. We don't think about money in the way that white people do. And I think it's important that we begin to think that way, to think like, when Mikhaile, myself, Tiffany created our businesses, we just had this idea and went with it. My white colleagues, they do the exact opposite. They have a business plan, they have a strategy, they make sure they get all the money, and then they move, right? And so it's a whole different kind of understanding of business and creation and framework and sustainability that we have to think about as business women here, and also that we have to think about as a community in a real way, how to support each other in that way too.
Yes, and I also want to bring up a very important point to kind of add some more connective tissue, because oftentimes black and brown people throughout the world, we actually are the largest density of humans here. So there is more power in our own population around the world. There are more black and brown people than there are white people. So our power is in numbers. And the idea that we always operate from a position of either dispossession or deficit, or this survival mode, robbing Peter to pay Paul, is a lack of education, right? It is, again, I talk about this idea, the illusion of arrival. Like, you think you've made it because you've made a lot of money, but you're the working rich. That means you still have to work to maintain the money you have, right? But wealth, it's generational. Interest, assets, and wealth. I'm a Nigerian man, a Yoruba man. I'm proud. Omo Yoruba, for any of y'all out there. My middle name, Olayimika, means the wealth that surrounds me. That is not financial. We're talking about these ladies, talking about you all the art, the ideas that are emanating off these walls and these spaces. That's the true wealth, right? It's access to information and trading that information. And when we look at the opportunities of not, woe is me, I don't have enough, or all the obstacles that are in front of us, no. The title and the topic is Echoes of Black Art Ecologies. You have 4 individuals that have all worked together over the last 4 to 5 years that have been in conversation to even make all of this happen, right? And I think the important thing is to remember that you are your own sun, right? This melanin is dark for a reason, because everything you need is within you. And when you constantly remind yourself that you can lean on your sister or lean on your brother for, I don't even know how I'm gonna pay this bill, right? Or I just sold this piece, I have to pay the artist, and I'm actually taking a loss, right? So it's important to navigate those conversations and be radically honest. The 4 of us have had many radical conversations about it, because it's not easy. But it is important to understand that a lot of the narratives and the conversation is predicated off of deficit or survival. But there is abundance, right? There is more of us out here that can lend a helping hand, that knows a collector, that knows a funder, that knows someone who's even just willing to show up. Half of the times it isn't even about money, it's about a body, right? Knowledge. So I want to encourage everyone in this room to ask those questions, just as you said, how can I support, right? In what ways can I support beyond just that?
And I think, Mikhaile, I think you talking about moments of how you ask for help. I just want to because I think what you do is incredible. And I know on my wall, on my mirror, as soon as I wake up and go before I leave my door, I have it on my mirror, ask for help. So I think about one problem that I don't have to solve or take ownership on, that I can give to someone else to help me. And not being a martyr. I don't need to be a martyr. I got a community. So how have you navigated that, and going into 7 years and sustained yourself and do that and ask for help and know when to ask?
I'm terrible at that.
Me too.
I've always been really bad at asking for help, but especially initially when I started the fair, I was like, I'm just gonna plow through this and like make it work by myself. And then it got to, there was a turning point where I was like, no, this is not sustainable. I can't do this anymore. And people actually saw the effort. And I think generally speaking, once people really see that you're passionate about anything, and that you really are serious and devoted to what you're doing, people actually step up. And I've never actually, I shouldn't say never, but oftentimes people actually approach me and say, how can I help you? That's what happened with Jeremiah. That's what happened with you. That's what happened with Stephanie. Many of the people who are in my stratosphere or in my network saw that I was actually devoted to a specific vision and mission, and they basically asked me, how can I help you? And then after that, that was when I realized, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should actually ask people because people want to help. And I think that was the transition for me, and I'm getting better at it now than I was in the past. Yeah.
I would say same. When people ask me sometimes, how can I help you? Oftentimes it's like, I don't know, right? And that's actually really terrible. But I think for me, 2019, I really had to change that. I really started strategizing more. I really started thinking deeply about like, what do I need and how can people really help me, and reaching out and asking questions, calling Mikhaile for advice, calling other folks was really important for me. And I think too, I don't want to keep harping on the money, but figuring out the foundational financial support as I move forward in a real way, and focusing on that. And if everything else had to slow down, everything slowed down for me in 2019. And so many people said that, to me, like, oh, I don't really see, Museum Hughes so much this year. And I'm like, yeah, and I'll just be like, because, I'm working on my foundational framework financials, right? And that's important moving forward as well. And so didn't make a full stop, but it was like really focusing on the funds, really focusing on that portion of it, so that moving into 2020, there is a plan and there is a real shift financially. Yeah.
Definitely. I know we're running short on time, so I want to ask one last question for some closing thoughts. And then we can engage you individually with questions happily. Can we leave the audience, our family really, because this is a family conversation, with a best practice or some level of success that you found in your journey, your trajectory thus far, something that brings you peace and solace that you can smile about?
I'm just deeply satisfied and full. My heart is actually full that people find value in this platform. I'm happy that people actually are gaining some sort of economic viability through the project. I'm happy that I get to work with amazing people every single day, people that I want to work with. I'm happy that that my life feels enriched as a result of, and that's something, a lot of people who are working every day can't say. They can't say that I am enriched by the work I do every single day. And I feel deeply proud and deeply just affected in like almost in a spiritual way by the work that I get to do with amazing people.
For me, I feel really blessed that I was able to tap into a need and really looking inward to see what was important to me and what was important to my community and the people that I loved, right, my community, and having the opportunity to create something that is beyond me. What I love most is people are like, oh, I know Museum Hugh, you're associated with Museum Hugh, and I'm like, yeah, because it's beyond me, right? It's not just about me being the face or my name being the face. It's about it being an entity that can really move, the needle in a real way. And so my advice for people is to really, reflect. Lorraine Hansberry said, don't be afraid to sit and think. I think it's really important for people to have the opportunity, and I fast social media sometimes, and social media is a large part of our work, but also I'll fast social media for a month, 2 months, 3 months, because it's important for me to be away from that and to sit and to think. And so detaching myself from that and to really kind of, speaking within and kind of connecting with myself is really important. And I think that's what gave me the confidence to co-found Milieu. It was like, this is, for me, it was something that I craved, this community, right? And so I think it's really important if you are wanting to do something to shift whatever narrative, whatever perspective, it's really important for you to kind of be reflective and also see if there is a community that you can speak to as well that can offer additional support. I think has been and still is really, really important for me.
Yeah, sure. Anybody in the audience looking to build or have their own community in their city, native city, anyone? Dope. Yeah. What I would say, as you're doing this work, and what's really fulfilling to me is first to assume and acknowledge that you're not alone.
Yes.
And so when I was building TILA, people don't even know before I started this organization in 2016, I was quiet for 2 years. I wrote down, what is Tiffany good at? What is Tiffany bad at?
Yeah.
How can Tiffany shore up her weaknesses and with what resources? How can she pour into herself to do that? And who else is doing it that she can collaborate with to help grow TILA, right? So I had data. I mean, I'm a research nerd, so I was like, yeah, ooh, okay. I'm bad at finance, so I need to work in the civic entrepreneurship space and get a fellowship, right? So that is really awesome to me, because I think sometimes we just think we're the only one doing something, and there's so many players in the field, and if you can really acknowledge that you're not alone, we can actually go a lot further. So that is the most gratifying of my work, is knowing that I have Mikhaile, I have people, I have all these amazing people in the audience, and that it's totally cool. So that would be my one piece of advice to you all, is just really understand what you're good at, what you're bad at, and who else is in your orbit, and be very strategic about how you shore up your weaknesses and optimize your strengths, right? And your morning routine is everything. Pray, meditate, sleep, eat, whatever you got to do, and then this work will always be fulfilling for you.
And I'll also answer that question myself and say that think about the systems to which you operate in, right? Don't think of the symptom or the sneeze, but think about the cold. Understand that you are working in an ecology, that it's a symbiotic relationship with several other individuals, that in order to sell, present, historicize artwork and ideas, that there are several other people that are part of that process. Get to know those people first in your community before you go elsewhere, because it's abundantly important to know your own history, your own home, your own context, and your own resources before you go out there fundraising or friend raising. I want to thank all of you for coming out and joining us for this conversation. Thank you all. Wonderful ladies and the great organizations that you all have. We'll take some questions after, out in the foyer. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.